Good evening. It's going to be an intimate setting this evening. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to join us here at Auditorium. I'm Steve Paramore. I'm the superintendent of Ashland City Schools, and we are glad that you're here on the premise of child safety. Obviously, we are all very familiar with technology and what is out there on the internet. And as a school leader, and I know that we have Jen here from Loudonville Local, we see this a lot. And our students are privy and have access to things faster than you and I could ever imagine. And unfortunately, there are some significant dangers in that. So I am looking forward to this evening's presentation, and I'm going to let our speaker take that away. And once again, since we don't have 1,000 people in here today, enjoy the intimate setting. So I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Okay, I tend to wander a little bit, so I'm going to take the mic with me this time. But my name's Emily Welka. I'm with the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. If you haven't heard about us before, we are part of a federal anti-crime initiative that was originally started in 1999. If you go on to the Department of Justice's website and you look up like why ICAC was created, these are the three main tenets. So number one, more kids and teens are online. I'm not going to dispute this. This has obviously come to be true. The second is that more illegal material is circulated online compared to before the internet was our tool. Commonly known as child pornography, we call it child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. If I use them interchangeably, just know that they're the exact same thing. And then lastly, more adults are seeking unsupervised contact with kids and teens. For us, this pops up most commonly in our proactive investigations. So we usually do two different types of investigations, either proactive or reactive. In our proactive ones, these are when our investigators are posing online as minor children. So 12 years old, 13 years old, right around that age range. And our offenders then reach out to them wanting to engage in sexual activity. So that's what I mean by this unsupervised contact and that reaching out behavior. Okay, so our main mission as a task force is to identify, arrest, and prosecute individuals seeking to exploit kids online. Whether that's through actively communicating with kids, whether it's through trading CSAM, we target all types of crimes when it comes to the internet and kids. We have a lot of different roles, a lot of different moving pieces, if you will, and we have a lot of federal partners as well. We are one of 61 task force across the entire country. We are the third largest in terms of our connections with either local law enforcement, prosecutorial agencies, federal law enforcement, and so on. In terms of our caseload, we consistently rank within the top 5 year after year. The ones that tend to rank above us, New York City, California has a number of ICACs, but consistently we have some of the largest case numbers across the entire country. So we work very closely with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, and then these numbers that come up very slowly are the number of cyber tip line reports that we receive every single year. So every website, application, whatever it's on the internet that you can use freely, they are legally obligated to report child exploitation to authorities if they are made aware of it. So how they report it is they have to, number one, alert law enforcement, and number two, file a cyber tip line report. So this cyber tip line report has a bunch of information such as the IP address, the account that's held responsible, emails, usernames, so on, the photos, the videos in question. So they type up all this information and they send it to us in the form of a report. So these numbers are the numbers year after year of our cyber tip line reports. So you'll notice in 2015 we got about 3,000. Doing the math on this, I believe, is about 60 a week. So nothing too crazy, nothing too unmanageable. And this was because the only kind of real social media, so to speak, was Facebook. Now when we go out to schools and we ask if anybody has Facebook, there's crickets. I'm told it's for old people, not my words at all. But it's kind of fallen off the map. In 2022, we received almost 17,000 cyber tips. So a massive jump from what we saw in 2015 to now what we're seeing even last year. So far, in terms of this year, we've received, I believe, slightly over 13,000 cyber tips. So we're on track to hit at least 20,000, if not more. What these numbers illustrate in the largest sense is how big of a problem this is becoming. It's very easy to use the internet every day and to not think about like what your kids are doing on it, what other kids are doing on it, what our offenders are doing on it, but I think these numbers really illustrate just how big of a problem this is becoming. And so with these cyber tips, this might be kind of hard to see, so I'll point out the different topics, but there's this preconceived idea that CSAM or child pornography can only exist on the super dark parts of the internet, places that kids can't access, and so on. Excuse me. So this is a breakdown of the different electronic service providers or ESPs that supplied us our cyber tips. So the number one largest ESP that we received cyber tips from was Google. And this is Google Photos, Google Accounts, Google Drive, and so on. So it's not coming from some unknown website that exists on, the dark net, seedy parts of the internet. This is something that adults and kids use every single day. The ones underneath that are Snapchat, Facebook, Synchronos, and so on. So what this illustrates is more of where this stuff is happening, okay? This happens on places and apps that kids visit every single day, that maybe you visit every single day. So this idea that stuff like what we deal with can only happen on really dark parts, inaccessible parts of the internet is not necessarily true. Okay, with what we do, there is a high linking with human trafficking. We work very closely with Human Trafficking Task Force. We share a lot of our data and information and so on. In our kind of field, human trafficking has really become a buzzword for parents, schools, law enforcement, and so on. However, I just want to kind of show you our tips that we receive compared to what the National Human Trafficking Hotline has also seen. So in 2001, the National Human Trafficking Hotline received a little over 11,000 tips. 232 of these involved sex trafficking, and only 72 of these involved minor children. In terms of what we saw in 2021, 35 child sex trafficking tips, and this accounted for 0.3% of our total cyber tip number. 680 of these tips were enticement cyber tips, so adults reaching out to kids, getting them to send material or to meet up with them in a certain sense. That accounted for 5% of our cyber tips. What the largest majority of our tips, where they come from, is from child exploitation material. So the photos, the videos, and so on. This accounted for 87% of our tips. So with this, what I kind of want to really express is that human trafficking is a massive issue. I'm not going to stand up here and say that it isn't or diminish it in any capacity. But in terms of child exploitation, where children are more likely to be exploited is online, on the internet, through social media, through communicating with strangers online, and so on. So this idea of the shady white van that everyone has kind of grown up knowing, where don't talk to the guy who's handing out free candy in his van, I want you to think of social media in a similar sense. So it's created to entice kids to use it, whether it's through like cool color schemes, whether it's through likes that they receive from other people. I want you to kind of associate that enticement that existed with the guy who's handing out candy in the shady van, that also exists on social media. So this is a breakdown of our cyber tips, going back to that from 2022. 2% of these cyber tips were for financial gain. So I'm going to talk about sextortion a little later, but this is kind of on the lower end of where our cyber tips will come from. The next one is 8% for explicit conversations, role play, things such as that. 32% for sex, so meeting up with a minor for sex, sexual activity, and so on. And then our highest category was content. So photos, videos, things such as that nature being created, traded, and so on. So with social media, with how big of an issue the content is becoming for us as a task force, for keeping kids safe and so on, I'm going to kind of dive into like different settings that you guys can use as parents, especially if your kids are utilizing social media. The number one thing are privacy settings. It's a good rule of thumb that even if your kids are being the safest citizens in terms of the digital world, if they don't have private accounts, it does open them up to that risk, okay? Because with a private account, it protects the information in their photos, it protects locations that are tagged in their photos, that metadata, and so on. So even, like I said, if your child is being the safest person online, please reinforce to them that privacy is very important. And a lot of kids may not interpret privacy the same way that we do. As adults, we kind of have a better understanding of why it's important to keep our information, our personal information, private. Kids aren't always within that mindset. So adding context to why privacy is important, why protecting that information is important, is just as critical as having them actually practice it. So this is Instagram. It's the Instagram settings page. Just kind of showing you an example. Under privacy, you can toggle that top right portion to private account. The thing to understand with social media is that a lot of times the default is public. So let's say one day you allow your kid to go on social media, you tell them have a private account, you have to manually go in and switch that account from public to private. This is Snapchat. So Snapchat operates slightly different than Instagram or other apps. With it, it's a geolocation setting. So within Snapchat, when you create your profile, you set up your account, your Bitmoji or your character is basically allowed to be seen by other people who have friends with you. So let's say, for example, I set up a Snapchat account and I friend my friend Eve. She friends me back. We can see each other's locations because we've accepted our friend requests. If I make friends with random people on Snapchat, I don't necessarily know who they are, I just randomly friend them, they can still see my location, whether I'm driving in a car, whether I'm listening to music, at school, at home, so on. All of this is public information. How to protect this is to switch that account to ghost mode. So this is under settings. It's one of the first things that you can see under my location. Switching that account to ghost mode removes your character, your Bitmoji, from being seen, okay? And you can also specify who can see your location. So my friends accept certain people, and then more specific, only certain people. So like I touched on very briefly before, kids don't necessarily view privacy the same way that we do. So it's really important to express to them and give them context as to why it is important. Such as, why do we protect our home address? Why don't we just give this out randomly to people that ask us it, like if we're walking home or if we're on the phone, so on. So it's really important that kids understand why what they're doing is unsafe and why a certain behavior is considered safe. So with video games and the internet, it's becoming increasingly more connected than it was in previous years. Online multiplayer is now, unfortunately, kids can use it all the time, and they may not necessarily know who they're playing with, what parties they're joining into, those people, and so on. And so while we want to, be safe with our kids, allow them to kind of explore, it's important to have conversations about what is okay to do on online multiplayer and what is not. So with video games specifically, it's important to tell them to have conversations that focus just on the games. So let's say they're playing in a party on a certain game and things are going well and someone asks them, what grade are you in? If they answer, then they ask another personal question and then another one and so on. So it's really important to enforce to kids that they need to keep the conversation focused on the game. That is if you allow them to play online multiplayer. You can also set up privacy settings on your video game console, who can see what they're playing, their username, and so on. What all of this kind of boils down to is setting rules and boundaries with your kids. So how much time they can spend on devices, how much time they can spend on certain apps, who they can interact with, and then lastly, what apps and sites they can use. Because with social media, kids are going to be curious. They want to use it, they want to enjoy it as much as maybe you do or their friends do, but it's important that they are made aware that the same risk that associates with stranger danger in the real world, that is also the case on social media. And while it's super easy to go on social media and use it safely, scroll for hours and nothing bad is going to happen, it's the interactions that they have with random people, random messages, and so on that really has the ability to put them at risk. So these are some common parental control apps that we have heard about through these presentations, through parents that have come to us and expressed that these worked really well. I've heard the most about Life 360 and Bark. With some of these platforms, they're also coming out with devices that are similar to cell phones but have very limited use. So Bark actually has a cell phone that has limited internet capacity, limited calling and texting capacity, but it still works as a cell phone, more or less. So lastly, I bet the biggest question is still, how do I know what my kids are doing online? How do I really know if they're being safe, if they're following the rules, and so on? The biggest advice that I can give is interact and immerse yourself in that world. So for example, there was one parent presentation I did where a mom could not figure out Fortnite. She was like, I tried to get my kids to explain it. They weren't very good at it. I tried to look it up online. I still couldn't figure it out. So she came up with this idea to have a Friday night game night where her kids would play Fortnite and she would play with them. And this, she said, was the best way that she could figure out how to work it, figure out, the little nuances of the game, while still having her kids use it and be safe. So the biggest thing is to just immerse yourself in their world. Maybe it's, downloading Instagram before your kids have it, playing around with the app, figuring out how it works. How do I set up this privacy setting? How do I tag this versus this, and so on? I wish I could, but there is no manual besides going on these websites and deep diving everything for how apps work in a step-by-step basis. It's really up to you guys to take the initiative and figure them out before your kids, unfortunately, figure them out for themselves. Okay, so going back to our cyber tip percentage, what comes from where and so on, I want to return your attention to the content aspect, so that's 60%. With content, unfortunately, it's no longer what our offenders create from, abusing kids, trading it with other people. A lot more of our photos and our videos that are popping up in our cases are coming from kids themselves. And that's unfortunately come from this issue of sexting. So these are some statistics. High school age kids, 13 to 17, so actually like middle school up until high school. These statistics are from 2020. However, they did a recent study and these numbers are still relatively the same. So we don't really have a solid answer as to why kids decide to send nudes, whether it's for popularity, get their crush to like them, so on. There's a whole slew of reasons. However, with the material that they're sending and they're receiving, it is still a big issue for us because there are a number of reasons why it's important to have these prevention measures and these prevention conversations regarding sexting. So, number one is that there is no separate law for the material that's created by kids, either consensually or it's sent to another minor. There's no separate law that puts that material away from the CSAM that we see in our cases. If it is an individual that is pictured in a nude state, either in a photo or a video, we still consider it CSAM, regardless of whether it was consensual to another minor and so on. It's becoming an increasing issue, and I'm going to talk about sextortion in a little bit, but sextortion directly relates to sexting. And I'll define that and everything, but it's no longer just the case of the exchange of photos, the exchange of videos. Now it's becoming an increasing issue in terms of, self-harm, suicide, and things such as that. With sexting, the age-old kind of conversation around it is that sexting is wrong, don't do it. And that is still very true. It is still 100% true. But there needs to be a bigger, broader conversation done by parents with their kids about why sexting is wrong. It's not respectful to ask or this person to send me nude photos. It's disrespectful to them, it's disrespectful to me, and so on. That's an example of a conversation that you can have regarding sending nude photos. It's a safety issue. These photos can end up all over the internet. They can, live forever in terms of how long they stay on the internet. These are all topics of conversation that need to come up before your kids decide to figure it out for themselves. And I know no parent wants to think that their kids are sending nude photos, that they're exposed to it in the first place. But unfortunately, it happens in every high school. It happens in middle schools. Unfortunately, it's just getting younger and younger to where kids are experimenting with this. So it's super important to have these conversations before kids figure it out for themselves. So with sexting also comes this issue of sextortion. So what happens with sextortion is when an adult offender creates a fake online profile, they reach out to other minors, real children, and they start a conversation with them. This conversation continues until the offender feels that they've gained the trust of the minor, and they ask them to send a nude photo or nude video. Our minor child in this incident does end up sending them, and eventually this offender says, okay, if you don't send me X amount of money, I'm going to send these photos to your parents, your grandparents, friends, teachers, whoever I can connect to on social media. We're seeing a massive increase in these types of cases. Our largest victim pool currently are high schoolers ages, 14 to 18, specifically with males. This isn't to say that we don't also see it with females, but just largely across the nation, this is our largest victim pool. So what I'm going to show you are some messages from a recent case that we had. So we received this case around Thanksgiving of last year. It was labeled as a priority 2 cyber tip, so this means that there's some indication that the minor involved in this instance was threatening to hurt themselves, either through suicide, self-harm, or so on. And these are the messages that were sent by the offender to the 17-year-old. So things such as, I want $6,000, I'm going to ruin your life, you know very well that once these videos are out, your life is over, and so on. These types of messages are very common across sextortion cases. So whether it's a video that was sent, a photo that was sent, you know, whatever, these are consistent across the board. What I'm not showing you here is that what our offender did was he went on social media, he looked up the name of the victim, and he was able to find his mom's Facebook account, his dad's Facebook account, and he essentially screenshotted them and sent them to the victim to send a message saying that he wasn't messing around. With these cases, they don't start off with an adult asking for nude photos. They start off very average and mundane in types of ways such as this. So this was the beginning of the conversation from the threats I just showed you. This small talk portion went on for about 20 minutes before our offender asked for a nude photo. This was a very smart kid that was affected by this, and our offender obviously knows this. He's been doing this for a long time. So what he did is he posed as a 16-year-old girl. He sent a nude video that he previously acquired, and that is what enticed the then 17-year-old to send a nude video in return. With these cases, unfortunately, they're not happening in terms of days or months, so we don't have a ton of time to investigate. In this case specifically, it went on for about 20 hours before this teen unfortunately committed suicide due to the situation. There was a similar case in San Jose a couple weeks after we received this one, where it only went on for 5 hours before that teen also committed suicide because of the situation. So I don't show you this to scare you. I essentially show it to you to just show you how big of an issue this is becoming. Kids aren't prepared to deal with this type of issue by themselves. And, you know, given the education that's been behind sexting, they're going to get in trouble, they're going to get labeled XYZ, they're not willing to come forward. So as parents, it's super important to have this conversation regarding sextortion. And the way to do this is, number one, don't blame them for what's going on. Yes, maybe they made some bad choices, but that doesn't mean that they are less of a victim than anyone else in this situation. The second thing is to not continue talking to the offender, either as yourself or posing as your child. The best thing you can do is screenshot the messages, screenshot the offender's profile page, whether it's on Instagram or Twitter, whatever, screenshot that profile. It's very important to us as investigators to look at this, pull any information we can out of there, and go on from that. The fourth thing is to immediately report this situation to either the Ohio ICAC or to your local law enforcement. And then lastly, submit a cyber tip line report. The Cyber Tip Line report system works across the nation. So let's say this offender that's affecting your child could also be affecting someone in New York or Wisconsin, so on. So it's super important that you submit a tip so that we can track his activities across state lines, international lines, etc. So this is the website for submitting a cyber tip. It's report.cybertip.org. It's essentially an online form that you type up your information, what happened, where did it happen, etc. Depending on, obviously, if you submit a tip in the state of Ohio, it'll come to us. If it's submitted out of state, it'll still go to the correct ICAC. Okay, so this is overall documenting an incident for exploitation in general. It's very similar to the sextortion kind of route of reporting. So don't delete anything, don't retaliate, take screenshots, save the evidence, and so on. And then lastly, also filing a cyber tip report with NCMEC. So this is their general website. I put this up here because they have a lot of great resources for parents in terms of education, whether it's topics such as sextortion, cyberbullying, any kind of internet thing that your kid could get into. NCMEC has resources to help you out, whether it's conversation starters, definitions, educational packets, and so on. These are a couple other resources that we have found very beneficial in terms of parents. So NetSmarts is run by NCMEC, and it has different levels of programs for different age groups, all geared towards internet safety. Same thing with iKeepSafe.org. They have a lot more animations than NCMEC, and they're more geared towards the younger crowd, but they're great resources. Same thing with the last one, GetNetWise.org. Okay, and then these are just a couple more. That bottom one, parents.thorn.org, is more of surveys, research that is done. It's more geared towards parents than kids or anything else. We also try to do our due diligence with resources, whether it's putting it out on social media, whether it's picking up the resources that I laid outside. We really try to supply you guys with as much stuff as possible. So that is our number, that is our website, and then these are our different social media handles as well. Thank you guys so much. I know that was a lot of information. I tried to condense it as much as possible and get you guys what we consider to be most pertinent. Do you have any questions for me? Anything you want me to go over a little more?
I do want to shout out to Chris Tennell, our county prosecutor, for not only the sponsorship, but your commitment to Ashland County and making sure not only adults, but most importantly, students and children are safe. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate it very much. Any questions?
There are no bad questions. So I believe it is 18, but most of our cases are anywhere from toddlers up until 16. Yeah, because I believe the age of consent in Ohio is 16. That's kind of where it gets a little fuzzy for us, but usually the cutoff is 16.
Is it illegal for an adult to solicit a picture from a child that's not obscene? So if they're just having conversation back and forth and solicit a picture?
So in terms of like a picture of their face or?
Yeah.
So technically no, but what we see with a lot of our offenders is that it may start there, but it eventually leads to asking for nude photos. So technically no, but that's an immediate red flag.
Any other questions?
So NCMEC has a bunch of resources there. Unfortunately, we are still working to develop those and catch up. But NCMEC, the National Center, has a lot of resources. Yeah.
You good? All right.
Okay. If you need me to go to the next one, just let me know. I think we have a question right in the middle. Yeah.
So at what age do you suggest starting to talk to children about this? Because you don't want to start before they have. I mean, our grandchildren are 7 and 3 and already can use a cell phone, but it's only with supervision. But that, I just asked for advice on that. Thanks.
For sure. So, in terms of starting to have these conversations, I would say as soon as your kids or your grandkids have cell phones, privacy, personal information, that needs to be at the forefront. After that, how we like to phrase it with the younger kids is if you wouldn't take a picture and show that picture to your parents or your grandparents, it probably doesn't need to be online. Because obviously, with kids super young, having that conversation about sexting is not, technically appropriate yet. So we try to phrase it slightly differently. So certain parts of your body don't need to be taken pictures of and posted online. Yeah. Does that kind of help? Okay, cool. So the question was, age of consent is 16. Can a 17-year-old girl, for example, still take nude photos and send them? With us, that cutoff is 18. So even though the age of consent is different than that age of when you're an adult, we still consider those photos inappropriate and technically CSAM. So yeah, it's kind of that weird gray area, consent versus these photos and videos. But yeah, 18 is the cutoff for us, absolutely. Right, but it is that gray area of like age of consent versus like the photos and videos that we deal with. So yes. Correct. Yeah, 18. We would usually refer them. There is an adult internet crimes task force. I believe it's run by the FBI. Not for sure, but I know there is an adult internet crimes task force. We would usually refer them there. But anyone under the age of 18, we'll definitely give them resources, help them out. No, so we are under the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. They were the ones that initially applied for our grant and set up our office and went from there. Yeah. Any other comments or concerns? So just to repeat the question was, what is the link between financial apps, so Venmo, PayPal, things such as that, and soliciting photos from kids? There is a huge link, especially in terms of sextortion cases, where our offenders will give out a Venmo or a PayPal handle, and that's where the kids are directed to send money. However, unfortunately, given how common, OnlyFans came out, that's exploded over the internet. Kids have the know-how to Google what it is, figure out that they can make money from posting these photos, sending these photos. So the financial apps have become a massive issue for us as well, because it does promote an avenue for kids to take photos, take videos, post them wherever they want, and then monetarily benefit from them. So just as important as it is to talk about social media, sexting, so on, also express to them the avenues at which it is also unsafe to use. So financial apps, they don't need to be used to profit from nude photos and so on, just to be completely blunt. Does that answer your question somewhat?
It does.
Okay.
And thank you for that. But I guess, is there a balance to be had between getting, how deep in your kid's business do you need to get in terms of they've got a phone, they've got financial resources, cameras, and connectivity in their hand.
So I would say if you as a parent bought the phone or the device for your kids, it is not technically theirs. It is yours. You purchased it unless they bought it for themselves. You guys technically own it. So as often as possible, I would say go through that device. Look in the apps, look in notes, look in text messages, look in everything. There is a huge issue with hidden apps. I didn't touch on them a lot, but let's say for some reason your kid has 2 calculators on their phone. One of them is definitely not a calculator. So just please go through everything, whether it's nightly, like they plug in their phone in the kitchen, they go to their bedrooms, you look through things, or even better, make it sporadic. Don't let them know that you're going to check their phone, because kids are very careful and they can hide accounts. They can switch between things that you may never see in the first place. So I would say go through those phones, those devices, as often as you can, and also as randomly as you can, because kids, they hide stuff. So in terms of the age, if they lie online, they say they're 18 when they're really, 14, 13, we still give them as many resources as possible, because especially in terms of sextortion, they're still victims in this case. Even if they go online and they say they're 18, in real life, if they're 14, we still treat their case just like any other kid, if they were completely honest. So in terms of us, even if what they say online is one thing and the reality is completely different, we still treat the cases the exact same. So offering resources and things such as that. Because it is essentially our top priority to keep kids safe. We're not going to victimize kids because they made one mistake and they sent one photo. We are going to have that hard conversation that maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it doesn't happen again and that they feel that they have the resources available to them. So we work very closely with like counseling services, forensic interviews, and stuff like that. That's one layer of the resources. So having them meet with a caseworker, work through this. We work very closely with NECMEC, as I stated previously, and they have different programs that actually allow you to take that picture off of certain websites and certain apps. And at the very end of it, we have informational stuff that we also give out. But we try to really educate and provide them whatever they need, especially in terms of sextortion. So whether it's meeting with someone, getting that photo taken down, talking to their parents, what their parents can also do, and so on. Yes, we deal with a lot of minor to minor offenses. So we actually also run the diversion program, which is essentially when a minor is caught sending nude photos, they are sent through diversion, which is a class, homework, and a test on why sexting is wrong. But that is becoming a large part of our caseload. So we try to make a point, especially to go out to schools, tell them about this, really being blunt and honest about the serious dangers that are out there. Because internet safety has been a part of curriculums in schools for forever. Not to date myself, but I remember getting this conversation. So it's important to us that we really make them aware of what is out there. Because it's easy to just kind of forget that the device in your hand has the potential to put you at risk. So, anybody else? Anything I missed? You can definitely call me out. That's okay. Right, so question was, will kids get charged if they send these nudes? Once they complete the diversion program, essentially that case kind of goes away, metaphorically speaking. But that is like a one last chance. If they continue to do so, then it becomes a much more serious issue. They aren't referred to diversion and it becomes like an actual case. We understand kids make mistakes. That's why diversion exists. That's why we try to educate them. But if it progresses further than that, that's when it becomes like a legitimate case. You said dating apps? Oh, hidden apps. Okay, so there are tons of them out there. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but the most common one is the calculator app. So it looks like a calculator. If you type in a certain combination of numbers, it opens up a hidden vault of photos, videos that kids can save in there. Not a hidden app, but Snapchat also has a similar feature called For My Eyes Only. So if you go on Snapchat, the camera page, so to speak, if you swipe up and over, I believe it's twice, there's this little tab that says For My Eyes Only. If you type in a code, it's another hidden folder, so to speak. So kids can save photos and videos in there, and it's an app that isn't necessarily hidden, but has that hidden part of it. I would say in terms of hidden apps, if you just Google top hidden apps used, you're going to get a long list, and the lists are going to be different for every website that comes up. I really wish I had a whole list, but I could probably be up here for 3 hours discussing each app and how it works. So let's say you're looking at your kids' phones. Like I mentioned before, if they have 2 calculators, a red flag. Go through the different apps that are on there. Even if they're not hidden, even if they look completely innocuous, go through them, see what's in there, mess around with it, and so on. So the question was, you find out your kids are sending these photos. Is there a service that you can use to find them on the internet? Unfortunately, there isn't a one-stop shop service that finds pictures that your kids have sent online. For example, we had a case in 2012 where a girl had sent a nude photo. We worked I don't remember the company, I believe it was Facebook. We worked with them to get the photo taken down. We closed the case, we thought we were good to go. That same photo created a cyber tip about a couple months ago because someone had saved it, uploaded it somewhere else, and now it's being saved and distributed and so on. So unfortunately, there isn't a software that picks up this photo and erases it from the internet or tells you where it is. And this is something we also try to express to kids, is that these photos, these videos can really end up all over the place. Does that kind of touch on it? Okay, cool. My contact information, I believe, there we go.
Emily, we have one more.
Oh, okay.
Places you can go for like technical support with your devices?
In
For
terms, what do you mean by technical support?
Okay, my daughter has the Bark phone, right? And the web browser, I can't see the history on it. I can't turn it on. I contacted them and they said they just don't do that. They're screening everything. But I can't go through and see what she's looking at.
I know the answer probably isn't what you want to hear, but companies are probably, like the companies that distribute it are probably the best resource to go to. Outside of that, I'm not entirely sure, just because I don't think that there are other things that monitor that besides like the parent company. So Bark, for example, they're probably the only ones that actually monitor that search history. Yeah, I don't think that there is something else. Oh, go ahead. Okay, that's probably a better question for the schools. I know that they're probably monitoring things, but I don't know if I have.
What school system is your child in? Oh, okay. If we need to, at least in Ashland City Schools, if we need to access, just because we've experienced this in the last 3 years for sure, if we have to dive into the history of a particular student and or a Chromebook that they've used or any other piece of technology that they have logged into, we've got some pretty sharp individuals that have been able to do that. I would reach out to your school district and have their tech coordinator dive into it.
Sorry, I didn't have
That's
a
pretty
more-
important to be able to see the history for sure.
Yeah. Any other questions? If you need to contact me at all, feel free to use my email, yes. And I know Gaggle is also another one that schools will use.
Phil, we use GoGuardian, correct? As part of that?
Any other questions? Anything I missed? No? Okay. Yeah, so feel free if you need to reach out to me for anything. This is my email. The phone number, you can just call the Ohio ICAC main line and they'll direct you to me. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you then. And thank you guys so much for being here. I know it's a Tuesday night, things are busy, but I really appreciate taking time out of your day and being here. So thank you so much.
Emily, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for all the great questions, whether you asked one or not. I think the information that Emily provided, I think, quite frankly, will save lives. And there's not too many individuals, probably from third grade on, that do not have substantial access to technology. So I know that we are pretty darn close to 1-to-1 in our district, but I would say in households, it's even more prolific how much technology is available. So thanks for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. You could have been a lot of other places and you decided to enjoy your Tuesday evening with us, so thank you. And thank you, Chris, for all your help and sponsorship of this. So have a great evening. Go Arrows.
There are additional resources if you didn't see them outside on that table by the exit. So feel free to take whatever you would like.